This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
The biggest icon in podcasting.
Welcome everybody to this week's edition of Doc and Jock. I am the Doc, John Macaroon. Joining me, as always, my cousin Adam, the Jock Strozinski. Looking forward to another great broadcast, my friend. What's going on?
Man, this is going to be a crammed podcast. I mean, I know we were talking about trying to keep this one relatively short for us, but we've got so much to talk about. I can't wait to get into this one.
Absolutely. First week of baseball. We almost had an opportunity to go through a week with no drama, but within 3 games, something went down. So, yeah, we got to talk about the Tigers, COVID. But the interesting fact is that while it's expected that maybe a team would get a virus rash that would, spread throughout the team, but one team on opening weekend get 20 tests to make their own rules, man, it's just kind of, when you look at it, I wasn't terribly surprised that the Miami Marlins had a rash of COVID because it's in Florida and that's the state that's just kind of going crazy with it. But I just think that when you recognize that when protocols are not followed or not really in place to a degree where it's just like automatic, something this serious in terms of sports and COVID, to just go, well, we had a couple tests. You guys want to play? Sure, let's just go play. And it's like, no, you got to think about ramifications. You got to think about this thing spreading. The Miami Marlins basically could have single-handedly, one organization led by Derek Jeter and Don Mattingly could have single-handedly shut down a sport that was desperately needing to have good news. So that's why the NFL and some of the players are deciding to opt out, because some of them are recognizing, you know what, we're about 30 days away from playing, and the plan that I'm hearing doesn't sound too ironclad. And it goes to show you that if there's not proper leadership at the top of any organization, funky-ass shit's going to happen, bro.
Yeah, I mean, the Florida Marlins just kind of going rogue and doing their own thing totally could have sabotaged the entire MLB season. And I think you're right. This has more ramifications than I think a lot of people are aware of right now. And it's not just confined to the Major League Baseball season. It's not just confined to the Florida Marlins as a team. This has ramifications for what I think the NFL might have to do in the way they have to look at their season. The Florida Marlins not only impacted their roster, they also impacted the Phillies roster. It impacted what the New York Yankees were going to do. It impacted what the Baltimore Orioles were going to do. And this is one of those things that it spreads, and it spreads quickly. And it started off with just a few guys testing positive. And next thing you know, the Florida Marlins as an organization have 20 different people that have tested positive in the course of less than a week. I mean, let that sink in for a quick minute. That's 20 different people that now have come in contact with a multitude of other people that now have to get tested. I mean, essentially, you have an entire team that has to get quarantined. And this is what we talked about when we were talking about what your expectations were for this Detroit Tigers team, because this was worst case scenario for a ball club that the Tigers might have to face, and what it could mean for their season, for a week at a time, 2 weeks at a time. This is something that we were discussing. If, say, the Tigers were to run up against an opponent like the Cleveland Indians, who were to do something as foolish as the Florida Marlins did, and were to be impacted like a team like the Florida Marlins have been, where you've got multitudes of people just getting shut down and you basically have to quarantine that team. A team like the Detroit Tigers could take full advantage. And as we're seeing as this week kind of plays out, this has been a pretty good week for the Detroit Tigers. I mean, this is a season that we have zero expectations for. And this team jumps out to a pretty nice start over a very good Cincinnati Reds team. And now they're taking on a division foe like the Kansas City Royals. And it looks like they're handling business here. This is something that the Tigers could jump all over, and it could help get them into a playoff spot or at least in contention for the playoffs. And I think that's something that we kind of kicked around and we didn't really take too serious when we were kind of talking about it, but it was always in the back of our minds. And we don't even get through the first week where you've got a team that basically has to shut it down. And then you've got other teams that are like, hey, we're not going to Florida. We're not going to play the Marlins. And you've got other teams having to reroute and are now basically sitting at home on their hands because they were supposed to take on the Florida Marlins. So the way this all opens up, if you're a Tigers fan, I think you should be excited. I mean, this is week one. And hey, you've got a team that's in the mix. You got a team that is fighting as the season already gets underway. And then you've got dumb teams like the Florida Marlins who are basically shooting themselves in the foot. So if you're a Tigers fan, you should be waving banners and jumping up and down. I'm excited as a Tigers fan.
I want to say this. Doc and Jock dig the long ball. You know, I know that Al Avila loves the arms. He came from following under the tutelage of Dave Dombrowski. He loved the big arms. But the acquisition, two guys of Scope and CJ Cron have destroyed the baseball. And yes, I understand that in years past, I would say that I'm more of a traditionalist. I'd rather play small ball, single, double, manufacture runs, bunting. But Jacoby Jones broke that where he failed at an attempt to bunt, then destroyed a game-winning home run. So this is the way baseball is being played. I can make an argument that 46 strikeouts in 3 games against the Reds is outlandish. It's quite stupid. But in terms of victories, you come out, playing the Reds, and you get 2 victories out of 3. So as we record, we got 3 wins, 2 losses. In my mind, I am not opposed to building a team that can destroy the baseball and maybe lacks a little bit of fundamentals in certain areas. But with the Tigers, the way they're built, at least we can say to start 2020, they're much more exciting than they were last year. At least this team, a couple guys can destroy the baseball.
Yeah, I mean, look, this looks like it's going to be built like it's going to be a softball team. And I'm okay with that. Like, you're going to strike out a bunch, but as long as you're hitting home runs and you're getting runs across the plate, I think for this season, we can live with it. And you know what? It might be the best recipe for success for this team. Crush the ball, swing at just about everything. You make contact with some stuff, and hopefully some of it leaves the yard, and you're going to eke out a couple runs here and there, and hopefully you're on the plus side instead of the minus side of some of these games. And I'm going to be okay with it for this year. I think both you and I agree. When you go to build a baseball team, you want to have good defense. You want to be strong up the middle. You want to have a couple guys with some power, but for the most part, you'd prefer to manufacture runs, especially in close games. I don't think this is a team that's going to win close games. This looks to me like it's going to be a team that is going to crush the ball, and it's going to get lucky every now and again. It's going to be a team that's going to have some defensive errors like CJ Cron the other night where he bobbles an infield fly that should be an automatic out, bobbles it, but hey, you get lucky and you do some good things, and you got Scope who covers first base, and you get a tag for a runner who is looking to possibly advance to second, wasn't really sure, kind of gets caught up in the mix, and they're able to get away with a win. And, that one was a close one. So I think every now and then they're going to eke out a game that they probably shouldn't have won, but they're going to do just enough things right where they're able to win. And then in other games, I think they're just going to be driven by power, and it's going to be a balance of how many strikeouts do you get? How much of the long ball do you get? I mean, at this moment right now, this is a team that is leading the majors in home runs, but it is second in strikeouts. I mean, that's what this is. That's what this team's going to be. It's going to be a team that is going to swing at just about everything, and you just got to hope and pray that they hit enough out of the park. Look, I'm not sure how you feel about it for this season, because this is a weird season where it's no longer a marathon. The baseball season, usually a marathon, 162 games. You then have to fight your way into the playoffs. Then once you get into the playoffs, just about anything can happen. This season's a sprint. It's totally different. This is the pedal to the floor. You're pushing everything, and you're trying to get as many wins early so that way you have a good idea of what you've got to work with. If you're Al Avila, you want this team going balls to the wall to start the season, and then you can kind of reevaluate when the trade deadline rolls around. And if you got a couple guys like, a CJ Cron, who in my estimation is probably going to be your leading RBI getter. He's going to be your leading batter on this team. He's going to replace Miguel Cabrera. you could possibly look to flip him. Again, he's on a 1-year deal. Same thing with Scope. Scope's a guy who you could possibly flip come the trade deadline if things don't work out. Now, if things are working out and you're in a position to where you can make some noise for the playoffs, you have that chance to then sit around, and we'll discuss it, whether you sit and you hold or whether you maybe trade some pieces away, or maybe you go and you try to get active at the trade deadline. But I think for right now, what you're seeing with this team is what you're going to get for the year. It's going to be a team that is going to look to mash the baseball. It's going to swing at everything. And I don't think this pitching staff is going to do you a ton of favors. I think what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to out-hit whoever you're going against, because I don't think the arms are there right now. I don't think you're going to see the arms until probably sometime around August, when you can start to bring up guys like a Casey Mize and kind of see what he has and see how he can work into this rotation. Because right now, I think your pitching staff is pretty desolate and pretty poor, if you ask me. But all in all, I'm excited about this Tiger season, and I like what I've seen through 5 games. I think it's been pretty solid, and I'll take it every day of the week.
Yeah, at least they're not under 500, so that's good. First weekend of the season, our expectations are low, so put on a winning product, play semi-decent, be entertaining. That's all you can ask for. And of course, Detroit would do that in front of no fans. That's the mark of Detroit luck, where you get shelled at home, but at least the fans on opening day would have loved to have seen a 14-6 game. That would have been outstanding. There would have been booze. There would have been a bunch of drunk-ass people. It would have been a wild-ass scene, but it was just docile. A subdued scenario where there's only 30 media in the entire joint with the players. So it's unfortunate that that's just the nature of sports at this moment. At least it's going to take place. And for me, I think that it's important that, Major League Baseball start their season and finish it. And I talked to Vito about this a little bit earlier on the Tigers podcast. I'm not as upset or fearful in regards to how baseball is going to play out, because look what happened. They just changed the schedule. They dropped the Marlins from the schedule for the next 5 days. Baseball basically, and I'll ask you your thoughts about it, I really don't put a lot of stock into what's happening. It kind of just feels like one big practice season, like a big, huge spring training, and whoever comes out on top comes out on top. It's like an asterisk in my mind. I don't put a lot of value into what's happening because the game's changed. I mean, on the first day, they decided, you know what? Let's just expand the playoffs. And they're like, okay. And that's what they did. So for me, it feels like a bastardized version of baseball. So I'm not heavily invested in the outcomes. I want to see progress. I want to see that, okay, start the season, end the season. And I could even accept if they don't even have a playoff, if there's a significant rash of infections, as long as they declare a winner of the league, if they can just play the 60 games, whoever has the most wins, if COVID is so severe, you can say, you know what, screw the playoffs. You had the most wins this year, you get the title. I'm not terribly invested into the wins and losses and the whole league-wide situation in 2020 with baseball, because 60 games, it is what it is, no fans, piped-in noise, weird rules, changing the rules, changing the playoffs. So for me, it just is diminished in all aspects. I just think the most important goal is just wrap up a year and let's get to the next one. And for the Tigers, if they're entertaining along the way, I've enjoyed watching the first 5 games, and that's where I'm at with it.
I think for me, I just really want entertainment this year. Yes. I think we all realize this is a weird season. Things are going to be different. Like you said, day one, they were like, hey, we're going to change the playoff format and we're going to expand it. And it didn't really seem like, it was one of those things that was talked about, but it didn't really seem like anybody really had to vote on it. It was just kind of like, oh, here's a decision. We made it. Let's move forward. So I just want entertaining baseball. I find myself watching probably more baseball in this already shortened season than I have probably all of last year, which sounds weird, but every chance I get, I'm turning on the game because I've been so deprived of sports that I'm not just watching the Detroit Tigers. Normally, I think we get so micro-focused on what's going on in the Detroit sports scene that we tend to neglect other sports because we're so inundated with everything that is going on that I don't have a Pistons seasons going on, and I don't have basketball taking place right now. I've got nothing really going on with the NFL NFL because they're trying to figure things out in this new COVID world. I don't have hockey at my disposal, and I'm not watching, whatever the Red Wings would be doing. So I'm watching everything. The other night I watched the Mets get pounded by the Atlanta Braves. I watched the Dodgers take on, I believe it was the Giants the other night. And can we talk about what these cardboard cutouts in the stands look like? Is it not weird and perplexing to you? It throws me every time I see it. But I'm watching everybody, and I'm watching everything, and I'm watching as much baseball as I can get because it's what we have. If you're a sports fan, this is what you've got, and this is what you have to take in. And I'm trying to take it all in as fast as I can and as much as I can. And I just want to be entertained. If the Tigers are lucky enough to play in the World Series, and they are lucky enough to, by hook or by crook, win the damn thing, I don't think you're going to be saying, hey, there's an asterisk by the season. I think what you'll say is, hey, we were lucky enough to do some things right, and we were lucky enough to stay healthy enough to win this season, but by golly, we won the damn thing. And you know what? We're going to be the 2020 world champs, and we're going to end up having a parade downtown, something that I don't think anybody right now expects to have in the city of Detroit, but you'll take it. But I do get what you're saying where you're like, hey, it's a weird season. Things are totally different. We're just going to kind of take it game by game, day by day, and let's not make too much of it. I don't think you're putting too much into the season, and I'm in the same place as you. I'm not putting a ton into this season, but I do want to be entertained, and I think I will, up until this team gets either eliminated from playoff contention or this team is, I don't know, they are total sellers. I'm not going to say I'm going to live and die with every pitch, but I'm going to be watching as much of it as possible. And I think you might find yourself in the same boat as the weeks kind of continue and as this team remains relevant. And I think that's kind of the thing. They have to remain relevant.
They have to remain relevant. They have to play at least fundamentally sound baseball and keep being entertaining and have some of the pitchers that are your starters start to show some things, because Fulmer, Boyd, first two starts, a little bit rocky, a little bit disappointing. Second go around, hopefully they perform a little bit better. Now, if you're the
Let me ask you this real quick. Let me ask you this real quick before we get into the Marlins. Now, if we were to take what we've seen through 5 games, and we had talked about this team being on a long-term plan, would you be impressed so far with what you've seen out of the first 5 games? Because I think if you're a Detroit Tiger fan, you're not expecting a ton from these guys. And I think what you've got in a short sample size would probably quench your thirst and say, hey, it looks like we're building towards something. It looks like we're on the right track.
Well, I'm more, like I said, fundamental. I'm more of an old school fundamental guy where I go, 46 strikeouts, what are you guys swinging at? Where's your plate discipline? That doesn't bode well. I mean, boom or bust teams, while can be exciting if the bats are hot, what happens when they're cold? We've seen that for years. So I'm more low-key in terms of baseball. I would be more along the lines of I want to see everybody contribute. I want to see Miggy, his body frame, get around. I don't want to see 7 defenders on one side of the field trying to block him from getting to first base. I want to see more from Miggy. I want to see a little bit more from the pitchers. So while, yes, this is a new wave of playing baseball and, swinging for the fences, it just doesn't work all the time. And so you need a little bit more. And I think I agree with what a lot of people will say is that this team is going to depend heavily on the likes of Kristen Stewart, the likes of Unico Goodrum, and others to complement the big bats. And you got to find unsung heroes. Who are they going to be? Who's going to step it up? Who's going to get out there for the Tigers and make contact with the baseball? And then the pitchers. You can't have Michael Fulmer and Matthew Boyd go out there and have performances like that. And then Burrows, Manning, when they get the opportunities, Funkhauser, when the time comes, and a couple of them have had their debuts, Funkhauser and Burrows, when the opportunity comes, you got to get out there and handle your business, not go out there and get destroyed and not have quality performances. So I want to see a little bit of progress, but a little bit more fundamental baseball. Boomer bust is entertaining, but it's not as fun as fundamentally sound teams. And that's why I think kind of has the feel like this is going to be it for Gardenhire. He's just holding everything over, and then the rest of it's going to just be, he's going to be walking away and going to be out the door when the season ends. But that's just how I think about it. Am I being too conservative?
I don't think you're being too conservative. I totally get what you're saying. I mean, look, I love fundamental baseball just as much as the next baseball fan. My thing is, I'm just looking at what this team has given us in such a microscopic sample size that I think you see some things for the future. And I think you might be right. I don't know how long Gardenhire will have the helm of this team and being the skipper here. But what I've seen from him, I think he's been a stabilizing force. That's the one thing I can say about him. Going from Brad Ausmus, who I don't think he did a great job underneath all of the media scrutiny when he took over. And remember, he was given the keys to a Ferrari and he basically crashed it the very first week he got it. So I don't think he did a great job underneath all of that scrutiny, but I think Gardenhire has come in and he's played ball and he realized what he was up against. And he's like, look, there's going to be a bit of a learning curve here. This team's not in position to win anything right now. It's going to be a rebuild. You just have to be patient. That's the one thing he's preached is patience. And I think what you're starting to see from some of these young bats and from this team, because look, neither one of us think that they're going to do a whole hell of a lot this year. But again, through 5 games, there are things for us to talk about. And we're not over here panning this team.
Right.
We're speaking about this team rather glowingly. And I think that's just because of where our expectations were.
Exactly.
And kind of what we're getting. So I think it's okay. I think it's all right to not be negative about this team right now. And I think the way we have to approach this is a week by week stance. You know what I'm saying? We've got to look at it a couple games at a time.
Yep. Burroughs, Funkhauser had an opportunity. I mean, Burroughs gave up 2 home runs, 3 earned runs over 2 innings. Funkhauser wasn't all that much better. Like I said, you kept 16 pitchers. A lot of them got to step it up. The bullpen, not too bad. Give credit where credit's due. Buck, Farmer, Jimenez, they've done the job. Soto is emerging. So there's some interesting storylines for us to peek into. It's not all bad, but it's just a good thing for us to be able to have a segment talking baseball and to be able to critique the team is good. It's not something where you started 0-5 and we're bored already. You're in it. You're in the mix. At 500, 16 teams are going to make it. 8 from the American League. You got to have an opportunity to be in the conversation. And that's all we can ask for is give us something to critique, give us something to analyze. And so far, the Tigers have done that. And like you said, we will definitely pay attention as the games approach, and we'll see what happens with this team. And hopefully Major League Baseball continues to have just the Marlins testing positive. And I know that story kind of took over sports right after 3 games after the Tigers went 2-1 in Cincinnati. People were freaking out going, oh my God, this is the end of sports. Look, I don't think it's going to end sports because of the fact that so far from what we're seeing, not too many others outside of the Marlins have tested positive. So there's a way to kind of finagle and cancel them and then reschedule games, doubleheaders. I know it might be tough. Maybe some major league teams don't end up playing the entire 60-game season, but so be it. As long as, like I said, the league starts and finishes, they can work around it and figure stuff out. What we're looking at, too, is what does this mean for the NFL? What does this mean for college football? Does this mean that it's not viable? I think that, obviously, the NBA and the NHL have set the example of what works in that if you're in a bubble and you follow it kind of strictly and you handle your business and everyone takes personal accountability, it can work. NHL, massive number, thousands of tests, no positives. NBA, thousands of tests, no positives. So it works. Problem is, now we turn the lens to college football. It doesn't appear like that is anywhere near feasible because the kids like to party. Not just grown-ups like to go get chicken wings. Young kids like to get out and about and handle their business. They like to go to places, establishments on campus. You can't quarantine the entire landscape of college football. So there's probably a scenario where they approach it, they start it, and history's going to repeat itself because they're going to power ahead. And what's going to, happen is we can see it. We can forecast it. You and I are bright. We pretty much know what's going to happen. They're going to power through. They're going to start it. 3 teams in a division, in a conference are going to get ravaged. And then we'll be sitting here in September, late September going, uh-oh, and they're going to pause it. I think they'll start it and then they'll pause it because there'll be a rash of positive tests. And then we got to decide how to handle it. So I think the viability of college athletics is a little bit light, in terms of my confidence. I'm not really confident that it's going to go forward. I just feel like the NFL is just like, screw it. If we use, if a team starts with this 53-man roster and then by the fourth week they have a whole complete new 53-man roster, so be it. We'll call them the Lions and they'll get on the field. We're going to start it because what's funny is, I know if you saw earlier on Wednesday, the Lions released the locker room photos, and everybody is laughing a little bit and panning it because they go, great, you got this huge amount of plexiglass in between the players, but when they get on the field, they're going to huddle, and they're going to bang into each other. They're going to be all up in each other's business playing football. So keeping everybody from testing positive by separating them in the locker room and not letting them exchange jerseys sounds like a plan, but it doesn't sound feasible because the sport in and of itself involves breathing on each other, spitting on each other, and having a whole bunch of exchange of bodily fluids. So I don't know. Is
this a porno or is this football? What's going on here?
Well,
what's up with these bodily fluids exchanging?
Well, you know what goes down in the huddles? People spitting on each other. They're like breathing all heavily on each other. And
like any chance I get to work in porno and make a sex reference, I'm going to do it.
But
I don't know what you're saying.
I don't know about college football, bro. But NFL, they're just going to be like, look, we're finishing. Who cares? Whatever it is. And that's why you saw a bunch of opt-outs. They were like, I don't like this. I don't like what I'm hearing. I'm opting out.
Yeah, and look, I think that's where the NFL has to maybe reevaluate the approach that it has for 2020. I mean, you've already talked about the NBA and the NHL doing it with bubble cities. I don't understand why the NFL can't just do a bubble city. It's not like we don't get football on Thursday. It's not like we don't get football later in the year on Saturday and Sunday. If you do a bubble city, you could totally do football games starting at noon on Thursday and you could have 3 games on Thursday. You could have 3 games on Saturday. You could have 3 games on Sunday. You put 10 teams in a bubble, and you just basically do it by sections. And you could basically have an alternating bye week for everybody. And I think it's a way that you could protect everybody. I just look. I know what you're saying. The NFL and with the NFL, it's always the dollar is the bottom line. I'm not sure how college football is going to play a season. I mean, you can't take the student athletes, you can't take the student part out of the athlete where you can quarantine them and basically segregate them and put them in their own bubble. I'm not sure how this works with college football. The NFL, I think you're right. They're just going to, whatever it takes, we'll get the season done and it'll all be fine. Whether it's a totally different 53-man roster than start of the year, so be it. It's no big deal. I do think that they should reevaluate how they approach that, though. As far as college goes, I think what you have to do in as this kind of starts to move forward and we start to move away from the whole event with the Florida Marlins, look, my anticipation for what takes place with college football has been rocked. I don't think it happens now. I was like 50-50 before all of this took place with the Florida Marlins. Now I'm even less so. And I just don't know if college football is going to be able to address this. I mean, I can see them building in rescheduling weeks, and I think that's going to be part of the process, but I don't think you have a 10 or 12 game season. I think you're probably looking at something more along the lines of 6 to 8 games, and that's because you have to take so many weeks off to make sure players aren't getting sick. And on top of that, these aren't professional athletes. These are college students, and you're already seeing college students opt out of the coming up season. You had on Wednesday afternoon, you had Virginia Tech's cornerback, Caleb Fairley, opt out of the season. Instead, he's going to take time and he's going to hire a training coach. He's basically going to run himself through a year's worth of testing and building towards the combine so he can test at the combine. So I don't know how college football is going to take place this year. And at this moment in time, you tell me, hey, this podcast comes out on July 30th. I'm going to tell you right now, I don't see college football happening this year. I think the NFL gets it done by hook or by crook, but I don't think college football gets it done. And I think a team like the Detroit Lions have been extremely lucky that they are running with a 90-man training camp doing a split squad, and yet nobody has opted out or nobody has decided to opt out. And look, I know that the Lions are ahead of the curve and they're outpacing everybody with the protocols that they're taking to keep their facility safe and secure and doing what they have to do to help make sure everybody doesn't get coronavirus. But the fact that nobody has opted out yet, That's nuts to me. That's absolutely insane. When you've got basically guys who were in consideration for a Super Bowl MVP last year opting out right now.
Oh, as we record, bro, it just broke. It just literally just broke. Lions defensive tackle, not a big, huge loss. John Atkins is opted out. First player for the Lions.
First player. There you go.
So
there you go. And look,
literally,
it
just broke.
I expect more to follow.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. It's you just have to believe that that's just the way it's going to be because of the nature of the National Football League.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Like, you've seen the face masks, right, where they have the shield that protects the mouth.
Yeah,
seen those. So like, I think it's a good idea, and I think it's a decent practice. But the problem is trying to get everybody on board with that. I mean, J.J. Watt came out and talked about it when they brought him to him, and he was like, okay, like, I just don't know how that's going to work. Now, I don't know if you've ever played a sport where you've had to wear a visor, you've had to wear anything in front of your face, but it takes a little bit to get used to, and it's never really comfortable. I've gone from playing hockey and wearing nothing covering my face to then wearing a visor to then wearing a cage, and I can tell you this much, it's never, ever the same. Wearing the cage is an obstacle in itself, and then wearing a visor, it's a little bit different. Those things fog up, you get sweat. If you get hit, you end up having your perspiration from your face fly on it. It's never the same. I would prefer to wear nothing, but I don't have the money for the eye bills and for the dental bills to pay for the teeth in my messed up eyes. So like, I don't know how. Look, I think what you have here with John Atkins being the first player for the Lions to opt out, I think this is going to create a snowball effect. I think you will start to see more people opting out.
Yeah, I believe so, man. Yeah, look at that. We try to be optimistic, but at least the Bears and the Packers, they've had some more impactful players opt out. So John Atkins is not going to really do much.
Yeah, and I think that's where the Lions maybe take advantage, right? I mean, you see everybody talking about how the Lions could be a team that goes from worst to first this season, and I think that's kind of where it happens, right? So if you can keep your core together and Matthew Stafford comes back healthy, and then you look at what happens with a team like the Green Bay Packers, the Minnesota Vikings, or the Chicago Bears, where they have guys who are a little bit more related to their core of players or that foundation that they need, and those guys start to opt out, and again, Stafford comes back healthy, what that means for that offense, I think that's how this team goes from being damn near dead last in the entire NFL to being a team that is now contending for a playoff spot, and it could possibly win the NFC North.
Ooh, what chances do you give? I mean, I know it's a bold prediction. What chances at this point, now that you're hearing some players in the NFC North not playing, what percentage chance do you give the Lions of really finishing the year atop the division?
I'll probably say 15. And that's really and truly what it comes down to is I don't believe in Matt Patricia. If there was just about any other coach running this thing, it'd probably be much higher. But I just don't buy into Matt Patricia. I don't buy into what he's done. I don't believe he's a very good head coach. So because of that, I'm only going to go 15%. And that's with me putting all my eggs in the Matthew Stafford's going to come back 100% healthy basket. I don't believe that defense is going to really help bail out this offense. I think this offense is going to, again, carry this team and is going to do most of the work to help set this team up for success. And it's, again, I just don't buy into what's going on with the head of that football team, and that's Matt Patricia. What about you? Where do you have them?
I go 40%. I think that there's a little bit higher. Some of the players on defense for the Bears. You hear an impactful offensive player for the Packers. I think one of the key signings for the Vikings defense opted out. So I don't know. We'll see what happens. But as we approach the season, lots of news, and I think you're going to hear a lot more player opt-outs. We'll talk more about it. But even in the age of COVID and opt-outs, Bill Belichick is playing a master game of chess, and we're all just playing checkers, because I'm guaranteeing, bro, he slipped these dudes hundreds. He slipped these dudes fat wads of cash or did something to say, you know what, you want to opt out? Because in no way, shape, or form do all these Patriots opt out and still believe that they're going to have a job unless they got the blessing of the Don. So I don't care if you come out and say that he's pissed and he's livid. Bill Belichick is pulling the strings, and he's tanking, and he's a genius. Always step ahead of everybody else, and that's why he's an OG, and we're all just watching, because 6 players opt out, 6 on the same team. Genius, bro. Genius.
I thought they had 7. Didn't they have 7? Like maybe, Patrick Chung, didn't he make 7?
See, it's multiple players on the same team. They're tanking, bro. That's just the way it is.
What are they doing? Taking for a quarterback then? Is that what's going on with the Patriots?
Dude, he knows what's up. He
knows what's up. Yeah, I know.
Right?
Good luck. Good luck trying to beat Bill Belichick.
Absolutely. Make sure you follow Adam on Twitter at AdamRSTROZ. Follow the network at Detroit Podcast. Cuz always enjoy the conversation. No matter if it's a half hour, 2 hour talk, it's always fun talking Detroit sports with you. Let's carry on our business. Let's observe. Make sure everybody subscribes to our podcast. Get the daily content by subscribing to Detroit Sports Podcast anywhere you listen to your favorite podcast. I look forward to next week, cuz.
Sounds great, brother. Be good.